If Baldur's Gate 3 hooked you for hours, whether due to choices that actually matter, tactical combat, or that feeling of absolute freedom, then you can be sure there is still a lot coming that you simply cannot ignore. I have selected 10 new games that follow this same path, whether through deep RPG mechanics, reactive narrative, or that level of detail that makes you completely lose yourself in the world. And look, some of them are closer than you think. I'm Matthew, and the video is about to start. If you loved Baldur's Gate 3, then Starfinder Afterlight is a name that deserves to be on your radar right now. It captures that feeling of group adventure, important choices, and memorable characters, but swaps medieval fantasy for a sci-fi universe with magic, technology, and space exploration. It is exactly the type of game that grabs attention just by its premise. What interests me most here is that it does not seem to try to be a copy of BG3, but rather something with its own identity. The idea is to put you in command of a crew of misfits, traveling through the Pact Worlds while dealing with a massive threat that could end everything. This type of premise works very well when the game actually knows how to invest in characters, and everything indicates that this is one of the main focuses. Another point that makes me curious is the combat system. Starfinder Afterlight uses the foundation of Starfinder 2nd Edition, featuring turn-based battles and tactical decisions that seem designed for those who like to think through every move carefully. It is not just about attacking. It is the kind of RPG where positioning, skills, and reading the situation make a real difference. And speaking of the crew, the game seems to bet heavily on companions with distinct personalities. Names like Cole, Tycho, Lou, Sterling, and other members have already been shown, and they look to bring conflict, charisma, and group chemistry. This is crucial in this type of RPG because at the end of the day, what makes many people remember games like this is not just the main story, but the conversations and moments between characters. I also like the direction it seems to take regarding the tone. Instead of being a cold and distant sci-fi, everything points to a more emotional adventure, with humor, drama, and a found family vibe in space. This mix of cosmic danger and personal relationships is precisely the kind of thing that can make the game truly stand out if well executed. Another important factor is that the project has already gone through a public presentation phase and entered community testing, which shows it is being taken seriously and trying to build interest early on. This is beneficial because this type of RPG depends heavily on how it matures before final release, and getting feedback from the public can help shape the experience significantly. Starfinder Afterlight feels like the game that will attract exactly the audience that missed a large-scale adventure filled with choices and memorable companions after Baldur's Gate 3. If it delivers well on the mix of strong narrative, tactical combat, and a charismatic cast, it has everything to become one of the next obsessions for RPG fans. Solasta 2 is a type of RPG worth keeping an eye on because it understands the pleasure of building a party, choosing every action wisely, and letting the dice decide the course of the adventure. The game takes place on the continent of Neokos and places you in the middle of a dark threat linked to Shadwin, with a very strong focus on turn-based tactical combat and choices that actually matter. What I find most interesting about Solasta 2 is that it does not want to compete with Baldur's Gate 3 on the same cinematic ground. It wants to win you over through fidelity to tabletop RPGs. Everything here revolves around tight rules, positioning, clever use of abilities, and that satisfying feeling that a good turn can completely turn a fight around. Another point that makes this game draw attention is the structure of the adventure. The campaign follows the 4 Colwall siblings, and this gives a more intimate and personal tone to the story, as if the journey is as much about facing a major danger as it is about dealing with family bonds, grief, and responsibilities in a hostile world. It is also worth noting that Solasta 2 has been in early access on PC via Steam since March 12, 2026, so it is not just a concept, it is already available and being polished. The project's foundation shows ambition, as the studio wants to expand significantly on the formula of the first Solasta with a more modern presentation and a sturdier experience. For 500 and 500 fans, the game is practically a full meal. It uses rules inspired by the SRD 5.2, maintains the focus on turn-based combat, and was designed to offer an experience very close to a digital tabletop, with that every decision counts feeling that CRPG fans adore. And there is a detail I think is important for those coming from Baldur's Gate 3. Solasta 2 seems made for players who like clear mechanics, deep combat, and less unnecessary fluff. It does not try to seduce you with spectacle alone, it wants to hook you through the quality of its systems, and that, to me, is halfway to becoming an addiction. Solasta 2 looks like a game that can fill the void left by Baldur's Gate 3 very well, especially if what you loved most was the tactical side, the freedom to build your team, and the feeling of participating in a real fantasy campaign. If you like intelligent RPGs filled with strategy and a tabletop soul, this is a name that deserves to be on your list without hesitation. The Way of Wrath features a story-driven, tactical RPG premise set in a prehistoric, shamanic world, with a vibe quite different from the traditional fantasy we usually see. The game puts you in control of a group of survivors who must resist a brutal threat, take shelter in an old fort, and prepare for a heavy siege. This already sounds great to me because it is not just about exploring and fighting. It is about surviving, leading, making tough decisions, and enduring the consequences of every choice. The Way of Wrath seems to bet heavily on freedom of approach. You can handle situations using diplomacy, tricks, or brute force, and the game also mixes turn-based combat, stronghold management, weapon and trap crafting, along with a handcrafted open world to explore at your own pace. The classless RPG system gives a more organic feel to progression. Instead of locking the player into rigid archetypes, the game lets you shape appearance, origin, skills, and reputation, which fits perfectly with the idea of building your own identity within the clan. Looking at it from the perspective of someone who liked Baldur's Gate 3, the comparison makes sense not because the games are identical, but because both seem to value choice, consequence, and character building. However, The Way of Wrath swaps the polish of high fantasy for a raw, tribal, and survival-oriented atmosphere, and that might be exactly the differentiator that makes it stand out. I also like how the game transforms days into story turns, making the world react to your decisions with encounters, quests, and constant changes. This creates a sense of pressure and momentum that I find perfect for those who enjoy RPGs where time matters and every day carries real weight in the campaign. Ultimately, The Way of Wrath looks like a very promising RPG for those who want something with the soul of Baldur's Gate, but in an entirely different setting and with a very strong identity of its own. If you enjoy strategy, narrative, difficult choices, and the satisfaction of feeling like you are leading the survival of an entire people, this is a game that deserves to be on your radar without a second thought. If you spent the last few weeks or months missing that Baldur's Gate 3 feeling of choices that actually carry weight and a world that feels alive around you, you need to look into Legends of Awen, Rise of the Fianna. Developed by Hawkswell Studios, this single-player CRPG is being built on Unreal Engine 5 and brings a freshness that I personally was missing: Celtic mythology. Instead of another generic fantasy world, here you dive into traditions. Bards who cast poems as spells, druids manipulating ancient forces, and warriors marked by war paint who channel supernatural powers. It is a setting that breathes identity, and that won me over right in the first trailer. You assume the role of Finn, an orphan child with powers they did not ask for, and your mission is to gather the Fianna warriors, the champions of the High Queen, to protect the realm of Terra. But do not think this is just an excuse for combat. What got me genuinely excited was seeing how the game treats narrative choices organically. There are almost no rigid main and side quest lists. Every conversation, every discovery can influence the course of the story. Furthermore, the reputation system causes NPCs to react to who you actually are, rather than an illusion of choice. Your party companions have personalities, convictions, and if you mess up, they can simply leave the party. This reminds me of that emotional tension in Baldur's Gate 3, when you knew a decision could cost a friendship. And speaking of combat, this is where the game truly surprised me. Exploration happens in real time, but confrontations enter a tactical turn-based mode, complete with a grid and everything else we love. The detail is, you do not need to kill anyone to win. In addition to the health bar, enemies possess a conviction gauge that can be depleted through intimidation, persuasion, seduction, or demoralization. When their conviction reaches 0, they give up. It is a pacifist approach that requires more planning, but it is entirely viable, and it completely changes how I face each combat. The game also uses a day-night cycle that alters the environment, the presence of NPCs, and even the hazards, so strategy begins before the first turn. Legends of Awen, Rise of the Fianna arrives at a perfect time. It does not have a set release date yet, but what Hawkswell Studios has shown so far is a digital tabletop RPG done right. Deep, personal, tactical, and full of consequences. If you are one of those who love forming bonds and romance, because yes, that is confirmed, exploring a world that responds to your actions and resolving conflicts with intelligence before the sword, keep an eye on Steam. To me, this is exactly the kind of game that proves the CRPG genre still has plenty of fuel to surprise us. If there is one thing Baldur's Gate 3 proved to the RPG world for good, it is that you can take the essence of a tabletop session and transform it into something epic, tactical, and immersive in a video game. Terrinoth, Heroes of Descent, which just came out in June 2026, seems to have understood this message perfectly. And honestly, I had been keeping an eye on this game since I saw the comparisons to Baldur's Gate 3 floating around on some preview sites. Now that I have played it, I can confirm, if you miss that atmosphere of gathering with friends, dice rolling, and every turn being a life or death decision, this game arrived at the right time. Terrinoth, Heroes of Descent is the first digital game of the legendary Descent board game franchise, developed by Artifact Studio and published by New Tales. It arrived for PC, PS5, Xbox Series, and even Mac, so practically everyone can jump in. The premise hooked me right away. Dark forces are invading the lands of Terrinoth, and hidden somewhere is a relic that can change the game. The problem is that this power cannot fall into the wrong hands, or the world will plunge into endless darkness. You form a company of diverse adventurers and set out for the most dangerous dungeons in this universe. It is a standalone prequel to Descent, Legends of the Dark, set 1 year before the events of that game, so even those unfamiliar with the original board game will be able to enjoy the story from scratch. What surprised me was the care put into the cooperative mode. It can be played solo, but also in a team of up to 4 online players, and the game allows your friends to join in the middle of a dungeon without needing to restart from the beginning. This is brilliant because it does not disrupt the flow for someone playing solo who wants to invite someone later. Better yet, it has full controller support, so you can play on the couch, on PC, on console, whichever way you prefer. This reminds me a lot of how I played Baldur's Gate 3, alternating between solo and multiplayer with friends, and seeing how group dynamics completely changed the experience. Combat is tactical turn-based, but accessible. It lacks that brutal learning curve or 500 and 500 rules you need to memorize. The game uses positioning, elevation, line of sight, and planning to your advantage, and you can build multi-character combos and devastating synergies. There are 8 exclusive adventurers to choose from, each with their own story, combat style, and abilities. You level up, upgrade equipment at the forge, and build your company the way you want. What I liked is that each dungeon features unique environments, with dynamic dialogues that adapt to your group, and side quests with narrative prominence. Full English voice acting also helps maintain immersion, and honestly, after Baldur's Gate 3, I can no longer tolerate quality RPGs that do not invest in this. The main campaign is split into 4 thematic chapters, but the game was designed to be played in single evening sessions. Each mission is self-contained, meaning you can sit down, play a dungeon, have a complete experience, and come back later. This is perfect for those with an adult life, commitments, and who cannot marathon 60 hours straight. But if you want to, you can marathon it too. The structure is flexible and respects the player's time. And the game functions as an authentic dungeon crawler, with 20 massive dungeons to explore, secrets, clever enemies, and relentless bosses. It is not an open-world RPG that gets you lost. It is focused, intentional, and each dungeon has its own identity. Ultimately, Terrinoth, Heroes of Descent is exactly the kind of game the market needed. It does not try to be Baldur's Gate 3, but it delivers the same satisfaction of controlling a group of heroes, making tactical decisions, feeling that every turn matters, and living an epic story with friends. If you miss this CRPG format, or if you have never played the Descent board game and want to know the universe, this is the moment. For the price of $34 on Steam, and with mostly positive reviews, I would say it is worth every penny. Dark Heresy is a dark, party-focused, narrative and tactical combat CRPG, where you step into the shoes of an Inquisition acolyte to investigate heresies, uncover conspiracies, and make incredibly heavy decisions in the Warhammer 40k universe. What catches my attention most here is the tone. Instead of a fantasy epic with classic heroism, Dark Heresy dives into the cruelest, most paranoid, and decadent side of the 41st millennium. And that pairs perfectly with the type of RPG that likes to make you uncomfortable on purpose. You are not just saving the world. You are dealing with corruption, lies, bureaucracy, and that constant feeling that any choice could damn you. The premise is strong because you do not play as a grand figure with armies and a colossal ship, but rather as an Inquisition agent working in the shadows. In practice, this should create a more investigative, tense, and personal experience, focusing on examining clues, connecting evidence, and deciding who deserves trust in an environment where innocence means absolutely nothing. Another point that I find very promising is that the game mixes investigation with tactical combat, so it does not want to be just a battle-centric CRPG, it also wants to be a detective game within a brutal setting. This is great for those who enjoy the rhythm of alternating between exploration, conversation, deduction, and combat, because it adds more weight to the narrative and prevents everything from turning into just a sequence of encounters. The universe also helps a lot. Dark Heresy takes place in the Calixis sector, a corner of the Imperium that is already rotting from within, with the threat of the Tyrant Star and the weight of Noctis Eterna leaving everything even more unstable. Honestly, this kind of setting has a lot of potential to create memorable missions because Warhammer 40k works best when you feel the world is already broken and only gets worse with each decision. And there is the Owlcat Games factor, which carries a lot of weight for me. The studio has already shown it knows how to make large CRPGs, filled with systems, choices, and party building, and here it seems to go even deeper into the investigative and moral side of the experience. This makes Dark Heresy look less like an action game in the Warhammer universe, and more like an RPG truly designed for those who enjoy consequences, planning, and dense narratives. I see Warhammer 40k Dark Heresy as one of the strongest bets for those who finished Baldur's Gate 3 wanting something mature, tactical, and heavy, but with a completely different identity. If you like RPGs that make smart combat, difficult choices, and a world that forgives no one, this is exactly the type of game that deserves to be on your radar. I will be direct with you. After spending so much time looking for something in the same universe as Baldur's Gate 3, Worldstone Chronicles appeared on my radar as an indie option for those who enjoy party-based CRPGs. Developed by Cover Club Media from Toronto, the game does not have an official release date yet, but it already features a free demo on Steam. The project has been in development for about 8 years, which shows considerable dedication, but it is also important to remember that we are still talking about an unfinished game. The game takes place in Ruanoth, a fantasy world that features distinct areas to explore, and the initial story is called Journey for the Crown. The perspective is isometric, with aesthetics that harken back to classic CRPGs, but running on a modern engine. Cover Club Media's proposal is to deliver an experience focused on narrative, featuring real-time combat with pause and environmental exploration. There is no denying that the inspiration from classics of the genre is evident, and for those who miss this format, it is a title that deserves attention. The class system offers 4 base options: Fighter, Rogue, Mage, and Healer. From there, the player chooses 2 subclasses from more than 17 available, in addition to a multi-class system that allows access to 2 talent trees per character. There are over 400 skills in total, and when you recruit new members to the party, you can define their specialization if they do not have one yet. This provides interesting flexibility in group composition, though only playing the final version will tell if this quantity actually translates into significant tactical variety or if it ends up being more superficial. Combat follows the real-time with pause model, where you can automate certain character actions and take manual control during more complex moments. The idea is to allow the player to pause the game to reposition the party and coordinate abilities without needing to manage every second of gameplay. It is a system that worked well in other CRPGs of the past, and here it seems to follow the same line. Those who enjoy tactical combat but do not want something excessively slow will probably feel at home, though the demo is the best way to see if the pacing suits you. The narrative uses a choose-your-own-adventure-style dialogue system with choices that reportedly affect the player's reputation, morality, and leadership. The expectation is that factions and NPCs react to the character's behavior throughout the journey. This sounds ambitious, especially for an indie studio, and while the concept is interesting, we still cannot confirm to what extent these ramifications are deep or if they follow truly distinct narrative paths. It is worth following, but with the caveat that expectations of world reactivity do not always fully materialize. In terms of exploration, the game features puzzles, secret areas, and items hidden around the map. The community that tested the demo mentions that curiosity is rewarded, with suspicious walls and corners of the scenery inviting investigation. This is a hallmark feature of old CRPGs, and Cover Club Media seems to be trying to recapture that feeling. The demo is available for free and receives periodic updates, so anyone who wants to get to know the project can try it out right now with no commitment. Worldstone Chronicles is an indie project that attempts to bring back elements that found success in Baldur's Gate 3 and other classics of the genre. A customizable party, narrative choices, tactical combat, and a world to explore. It is still in development, so it is too early to say if it will deliver everything, but the free demo offers a real sample of what is being built. If you enjoy CRPGs, my suggestion is to add it to your wishlist and test the demo. Then, you can decide for yourself if it is worth following closely. Prelude Dark Pain is one of those games that arrives with a very clear energy, dark fantasy, tactical combat, and a strong sense that every decision matters. It is a strategic RPG set in the world of Stutera, where you assume the role of Soren, a blacksmith and former warrior who ends up dragged back into war to lead a revolt against the Order of the Ashen Crusade. The game embraces a very heavy fantasy tone, dealing with war, disease, religious terror, and a reality cracking open bit by bit, so it does not try to be beautiful in the traditional sense. It wants to be impactful, dense, and even oppressive at times, and I think that is great, because this kind of atmosphere connects deeply with those who like an RPG that conveys real weight. On the combat side, Prelude Dark Pain seems to hit exactly what a Baldur's Gate 3 fan looks for after finishing the game: strategy. It works with turn-based battles, a team of up to 5 heroes, and a huge focus on positioning, terrain, and synergy between classes. So it is not just about swinging weapons, it is about thinking through each turn carefully. From what has been shown, flanking enemies and utilizing the environment correctly can make a massive difference, and that always makes combat more satisfying for those who enjoy true tactics. Another point that I find very strong is the variety of characters. The game includes more than 20 playable heroes, each with 2 talent paths and a large number of abilities, alongside 8 different classes to build your team your way. This gives me the impression of an RPG that wants to reward experimentation, as it makes you want to test different formations, fit roles together, and discover which combinations actually work best. Outside of battle, the game also aims to go beyond the basics. The proposal includes resource management, tasks for your heroes, and even settlement administration elements, which adds that layer of strategy that I particularly love in more ambitious RPGs. This type of system usually makes the adventure feel more alive, because the player is not just moving from combat to combat. They feel like they are building something larger throughout the campaign. What also increases my interest is that Prelude Dark Pain does not look like a small or timid project. It has already appeared with demos, trailers, and significant press attention, and the expectation is an early access release on PC still in 2026, though the exact date remains open. This shows the game is still being polished, but it already has a well-defined visual and mechanical identity. I see Prelude Dark Pain as one of the most promising games for those who finished Baldur's Gate 3 wanting something darker, tenser, and more focused on pure strategy. It does not seem to want to imitate BG3, it wants to follow its own path, and precisely for that reason, it has a chance to win over those who like dark fantasy, deep tactical combat, and RPGs with strong personality. Band of Crusaders does not try to copy BG3, but rather to deliver another dark fantasy with group leadership, strategic decisions, and a cruel world to traverse. Here, you assume the role of a Grand Master of an Order of Knights and lead a crusade against a demonic invasion in a medieval Europe devastated by fear, heresy, and creatures inspired by biblical and folklore themes. What catches my attention most is the game's identity. Instead of following the classic path of heroic fantasy, Band of Crusaders bets on a heavy medieval atmosphere, where sin, religion, ruin, and supernatural horror walk hand in hand. And this gives the world a very strong personality right from the start. To me, this type of setting already makes a difference, because it conveys the feeling of a grittier, more desperate, and more unpredictable journey. The big twist is that the game mixes RPG with strategy in a very open way. You explore a sandbox world, recruit crusaders, strengthen your camp, and face both demons and human enemies while attempting to keep your order functioning amidst the chaos. This looks interesting to me because the fantasy here is not just about being the hero, but rather carrying an entire campaign on your back, making decisions that affect survival, progression, and military power. In combat, Band of Crusaders follows a different direction from Baldur's Gate 3. Instead of purely turn-based battles, it uses real-time confrontation with a system described as a reimagining of real-time with pause, including a sort of tactical slow motion to issue orders, flank, set ambushes, and adjust your strategy in the heat of battle. I like this because it creates a different, more immediate tension, as if each skirmish requires quick reading of the field without sacrificing the cerebral side. Another point that pleases me a lot is the management layer. The game does not just want you to win battles, it also wants you to tend to the wounded, repair weapons and armor, manage camp resources, and customize your warriors' skills and equipment. This type of structure usually makes everything more engaging, because you begin to care not only about the next combat, but about the health of the entire campaign. There is also a flavor of collective progression that I find very promising. The studio's goal is to make you transform a company of warriors, practically at the level of peasants, into heroes capable of facing archdemons, while traversing a simulated Europe and reacting to threats that keep growing. This gives me that satisfying feeling of earned evolution, where the group gains identity gradually and every victory feels truly hard-fought. So, if your connection to Baldur's Gate 3 came from the pleasure of commanding a group, facing a dark world, and feeling that your tactical choices matter, Band of Crusaders has everything to grab your attention, even while following a more strategic and less cinematic structure. The game still has no announced release date on Steam, which means it remains a concept for now, but it is exactly the type of project I would keep a close eye on. If there is one thing Baldur's Gate 3 proved, it is that we are hungry for RPGs where choices actually matter, where the character is an extension of our personality and not just a puppet with a sword. And if you are in that boat, but sometimes feel like you want something more focused on conversation, investigation, and the complete madness of a tabletop RPG session, Esoteric Ebb, released in March 2026, arrived like a slap in the face. Developed practically solo by Christopher Bodegard and published by Raw Fury, this game is one of the most genuine surprises I have played this year. It is different, it is strange, and that is exactly why I cannot stop thinking about it. Here, you are not a fearless warrior or a powerful mage. You are a cleric, a holy bureaucrat representing the law in a magical world. And the first thing that happens is that you wake up after having drowned. Seriously. Your body was fished out of the water, and now, in addition to trying to remember why you drowned, you need to investigate the explosion of a tea house in a city that is on the eve of its first election. 3 political parties vying for power, racial tensions between dwarves, goblins, humans, and orcs, and a conspiracy that goes much deeper than it seems. If that sounds absurd, it is because it is, and this controlled madness is the heart of the game. I know everyone will compare Esoteric Ebb to Disco Elysium, and I won't lie, the structure is very similar. You have internal voices representing your attributes, talking to you, suggesting brilliant or completely idiotic ideas, and most of the time, you are reading and choosing dialogue. But where Disco Elysium was gray, melancholy, and urban, Esoteric Ebb embraces classic fantasy with open arms. Sleeping griffins, philosophical demons, magic, ancient gods, angels. And it does this with a lighter, colorful, almost cartoonish tone. Its humor is one of the highest points. I found myself laughing out loud when my own attributes entered a debate because I decided to rummage through a trash can. It is a game that does not take itself seriously, but takes your choices very seriously. The gameplay is purely based on D20 rolls and narrative decisions. There is no traditional combat system with swords and spells flying everywhere. Instead, everything is a check, convincing a guard, slipping past a griffin, or simply trying to walk down a staircase without hurting yourself. The unpredictability of the dice is real, and I saw my cleric, who was supposed to be smart, fail miserably at something simple. And the game has a near-death system that is brilliant. When you are about to die, you get 6 d20 rolls. 3 successes and you survive with 1 hit point. 3 failures and it's game over. This creates perfect dramatic tension and makes you feel like you are literally at a tabletop session praying for the die to land on your side. What fascinates me is the freedom for you to be exactly what you want. You can be the diplomatic cleric, the intimidator, complete walking chaos, or that character who completely ruins the campaign. And the consequences come without mercy. I tried to be clever at one point, took a misstep, and ended up challenging someone who was clearly stronger than me. The game did not save you. It simply said, all right, you did that, now deal with it. This feeling that the world reacts to your character, not to a predefined script, is exactly what made Baldur's Gate 3 special. And Esoteric Ebb has that, just in a more intimate format, more focused on the written word. Now, I need to be honest about one thing. Esoteric Ebb requires patience. The political world is complex, with factions, ideologies, and alliances that you need to pay attention to in order to understand. It is not a game you play on autopilot, and the biggest obstacle for many of us is the language barrier. The game is entirely in English, with no voice acting and no subtitles in Portuguese. Given that it is practically an interactive book, if you do not have an intermediate command of English, you will miss the essence. It's a shame, because the text is so well written, so sharp, that I really wished more people could enjoy it without having to rack their brains over the language. Esoteric Ebb is an experience for a specific niche, but if you are part of that niche, it is pure gold. If you loved Baldur's Gate 3 for the depth of choices, the reactivity of the world, and for feeling like your character was truly yours, but sometimes wanted something that focused more on conversation, investigation, and the chaos of a tabletop RPG, this game is for you. It is not the successor to Baldur's Gate 3 in the sense of epic combat and next-gen graphics, but it is a spiritual successor in what really matters: the feeling of living a story that only you could have created.